Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by asking you a question that I think, well, if we're being totally honest, it kind of haunts every single one of us.
Oh, yeah.
It definitely keeps me up at night sometimes.
Right.
How many times have you looked back at a major life decision? Maybe it was a bad investment that just completely tanked, or a relationship that went south, or even just a job you took that turned out to be an absolute nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
And you sit there and you say to yourself, I was such an idiot.
Oh, the universal lament. I should have known better.
Yes.
It's essentially the soundtrack of the human condition.
It really is.
Okay.
We beat ourselves up. We obsess over the mistake. We replay the tape in our heads over and over, looking for that one specific moment where we went wrong.
Because we want to find the error.
Right. We convince ourselves that because things turned out badly, we must have chosen badly in the first place.
It seems logical.
It does seem like a logical connection. Bad result equals bad process. But today we are going to flip that entire narrative completely on its head.
Which is exciting.
It is. We are diving into a body of work that argues that you can do everything perfectly right. You can make the mathematically perfect decision, you can still lose.
Yeah.
And conversely, you can make a terrible, reckless, stupid decision and win.
Which is a terrifying thought for the control freaks among us.
Oh, absolutely terrifying.
It suggests that the universe is just a lot looser and more chaotic than we would like to admit.
It is terrifying, but as we are going to find out today, it is also incredibly liberating once you grasp it. We are deep diving into Thinking in Bets, Making Smarter Decisions When You Don't Have All the Facts by Annie Duke.
Such a great source.
It really is. And I want to be clear right off the bat for you listening, this is not just a business book.
No, definitely not.
And it is not just about how to play cards either. This is a manual for how to operate a human brain in an uncertain universe. It is about rewiring how we think about being right.
It is one of those rare books that completely changes the operating system of your mind.
Yeah.
Once you see the world through the lens, Duke, you can't unsee it. You start noticing these errors in thinking everywhere.
Everywhere. In the news, in your office, at the dinner table with your family.
Exactly.
And to really understand why this perspective is so incredibly unique, we have to talk about Annie Duke herself.
Her background is key here.
Because usually when we read books on decision-making, they're written by, a Fortune 500 CEO or maybe a behavioral economist in a tweed jacket sitting in some university office.
Right.
Annie Duke she is neither of those things. Or rather, she is a really strange hybrid of both.
She has one of the most fascinating origin stories of any author we have ever covered on a deep dive.
That's about it.
So she actually started on a very traditional high-level academic path. She was at the University of Pennsylvania doing really heavy cognitive psychology research.
Like Ivy League elite academia.
Exactly. And she was excelling. She'd actually won a National Science Foundation fellowship, which is a huge deal in that world.
Yeah, that is not easy to get.
Not at all. She was studying how children learn language, really complex structural linguistic work. She was essentially moments away from her PhD.
She was fast-tracking to be a tenured professor.
She was.
Yeah.
But then the curveball hits. Life happened.
As it always does.
Right. She got a severe stomach illness right before she was supposed to defend her dissertation.
Oh, wow, the timing.
Terrible timing.
Yeah.
It was bad enough that she actually had to take a medical leave of absence from the university. And during that leave, everything changed.
How so?
Well, she got married and she moved to a tiny town in Montana. And suddenly she is no longer in the Ivy League bubble.
Right. She is out in the real world.
And more importantly, that fellowship money she had, it is gone.
Oh, of course. So she is in Montana. She is effectively broke, and she has a very specific set of skills involving cognitive psycholinguistics that are not exactly in high demand in rural Montana.
Exactly. There was not a huge market for dissertation defenses in Billings.
Right.
But she had a brother, Howard Lederer, who was already a successful professional poker player. And he suggested she try her hand at the tables just to make some cash while she recovered.
So I paid the bills.
Yeah. So she goes to this place called the Crystal Lounge in Billings. And we really have to paint the picture here for you listening. This is not the Bellagio with the dancing fountains and the beautiful Chihuly glass on the ceiling.
No, it is not Vegas.
It's a legal card room in the literal basement of a bar in Montana.
It sounds like the opening scene of a Western movie. You know, the cigarette smoke, the cowboy hats, the whole 9 yards.
It really does. But here is the thing. What was supposed to be a temporary way to pay the rent turned into a 20-year career.
Which is wild.
And she didn't just survive in that world. She dominated it. She became a world-class professional.
We are talking highest levels, right?
We are talking a World Series of poker bracelet winner, the Tournament of Champions, winner over $4 million in tournament earnings. She sat across the table from the absolute best in the world, and she beat them.
That is a massive, massive pivot from cognitive psychology in a pristine lab to high-stakes poker in smoky basements and casinos.
It is.
But the core argument of this deep dive, and really the big aha moment of the source material, is that she never actually left the lab.
Exactly.
She just moved to a different kind of laboratory.
That is the absolute key insight. She realized that the poker table was actually a far better laboratory for studying human decision-making than the university lab ever was.
Why is that?
Because in the real world, or rather in the academic lab, you try to control all the variables. You try to isolate things so you can study them in a vacuum.
Right, you want a clean environment.
But in poker, you cannot control the variables. You are forced to make high-stakes decisions under extreme pressure with incomplete information.
And real money on the line.
Yes. And that leads us to the central metaphor of the entire book, the concept we're going to unpack for the rest of this conversation. Life is not like chess. Life is like poker.
Okay, let us pull on that thread immediately. Because I feel like I was raised, and I think a lot of you listening were raised to believe life is chess.
Most of us were.
The whole educational system, the corporate ladder, it is all built on the idea that if I study the board, if I think 3 moves ahead, if I make the right move, I will win. Chess feels fair.
Chess is fair.
Huh.
That is the really seductive part of it. Chess is a game of perfect information.
Meaning nothing is hidden.
Exactly. Think about it. You can see all my pieces on the board. I can see all your pieces. There is nothing hidden from view. There are no dice rolls. There is no fog of war.
Right.
If you lose a game of chess, it is mathematically because you made a mistake or I just made a better move. There is a direct, clear causal link between the quality of your decision and the outcome of the game.
Right. If Magnus Carlsen loses a world championship match, he doesn't stand up and say, man, I got so unlucky today.
No.
He says, I missed a line of computation on move 14.
Exactly. Chess is computable. Theoretically, there is a right answer for every single position on the board.
Yeah. But poker. Poker is a game of incomplete information. You do not know my cards. I do not know yours.
We don't know what card is coming next off the top of the deck either.
Right. It involves luck. You can play a hand mathematically perfectly. You can make the absolute best decision based on the exact odds, and you can still lose because a random card falls on the river.
And that drives us crazy. It feels like a massive injustice.
It drives us crazy because human beings crave certainty. But Duke's argument is that life is almost always poker and almost never chess.
Give me some examples of that.
Well, think about any major life choice. When you take a new job, you do not know if the company will be acquired and the culture will totally change next year.
Right.
When you get married, you do not know how you or your partner will evolve over the next 10 years. When you buy a house, you do not know if the city zoning laws are going to change and put a highway in your backyard.
We're always making decisions with incomplete information.
We're always guessing. So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how to navigate that uncertainty without losing our minds. We want to understand why our brains are wired to be so bad at this, and we want to give you, the listeners, some mental tools, specifically what Duke calls the wanna bet framework, to stop focusing so much on the outcome and start focusing on the process.
Yes, we want to move you from being outcome-oriented, which is our standard default setting, to being process-oriented.
Let us start with the biggest trap of all, something Duke calls resulting.
This is a big one.
And to explain this, we have to go back to a moment that is etched in the memory of every single sports fan in America. We are going back to 2015, Super Bowl 49, the Seattle Seahawks versus the New England Patriots.
Oh, a moment of absolute agony and ecstasy, depending entirely on which jersey you were wearing that day.
It really is the ultimate case study for this concept. Let us set the scene for anyone who might have repressed this memory or maybe isn't a football fan.
Please do.
There are 26 seconds left on the clock in the fourth quarter. The Seahawks are down by 4 points, but they have driven the ball all the way down the field. They are on the Patriots' 1-yard line.
So close.
They are exactly 1 yard away from winning back-to-back Super Bowls.
The tension in the stadium is just unbearable at this point.
And they have Marshawn Lynch in the backfield. Beast mode. This guy is a human wrecking ball. He is arguably the absolute best short yardage running back in the entire NFL at that specific moment in time.
a physical powerhouse.
So everyone in the stadium, everyone watching on TV, including me, literally screaming at my television, is thinking the exact same thing. Hand the ball to Marshawn. He smashes it in. Game over. Seahawks win.
It seems like the obvious, safe, inevitable choice. Hand it to your best guy.
But Pete Carroll, the Seahawks coach, calls a pass play.
Yep.
Russell Wilson drops back. He throws a quick slant over the middle, and Malcolm Butler, the Patriots' rookie cornerback, jumps the route. Interception. Game over. Patriots win the Super Bowl.
And the sports world just completely exploded.
Yeah, exploded. The headlines the next day were incredibly brutal. I actually looked them up before we started recording. Worst play call in history. Dumbest call ever. What was he thinking? People were legitimately calling for Pete Carroll to be fired.
Wow.
The narrative was instant, and it was unanimous. Pete Carroll made a terrible decision because the Seahawks lost.
Well, here is where we have to put on our deep dive glasses and look a little closer at the underlying mechanics. This reaction is a classic textbook example of resulting.
Resulting.
Yes. The public looked at the result, the interception, and worked backward to decide that the decision itself must have been bad.
Because bad outcome equals bad process in our minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if we actually look at the analysis from people like Benjamin Morris at 538 or Brian Burke at Slate, people who actually understand the deep math and game theory of football,
Yeah.
the call was actually completely defensible.
Really?
Some even argued it was strategically brilliant.
Wait, brilliant. You are going to have to walk me through that one. How do you possibly justify throwing the ball on the 1 yard line with beast mode standing right there in the backfield?
It comes down to the math, and specifically it comes down to clock management. This is the poker logic in action. They had 26 seconds and only one timeout remaining.
26 seconds, one timeout. That is the critical constraint.
That is the whole puzzle. If they hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch on second down and he gets stopped short of the goal line, which does happen even to beast mode, the clock keeps running.
Right. A tackle inbounds means the clock runs.
Yes. So they have to burn that final timeout immediately just to stop the clock and regroup.
Right.
That leaves them with maybe 10 seconds left. Now they are facing a chaotic third down with absolutely zero timeouts.
They are totally limited.
Extremely limited. If they run again on third down and get stopped, they probably cannot get the players lined up fast enough to get a fourth playoff. The game just ends.
So running the ball actually puts them in a strategic box. It limits their options down the line.
Drastically. By passing on second down, Pete Carroll was leveraging the actual rules of the game. If the pass is incomplete, the clock stops automatically.
Oh.
That preserves their final timeout. That guarantees them all 3 remaining downs to try to score. It maximizes their chances of getting 3 distinct attempts at the end zone. He essentially bought himself an extra play by throwing the ball.
Okay, so the logic definitely holds up regarding the clock management. I see that. But what about the risk? What about the interception? Isn't that a huge risk to take right by the goal line?
Well, historically in that exact situation, the interception rate for a pass play was about 2%.
2%? That is tiny.
It is incredibly low. Carroll made a call that had a very high probability of either a touchdown or an incomplete pass, which then allows them to safely run Lynch on the next play. He made a high-quality, mathematically sound decision.
He just got a bad result.
Yes. That 2% chance happened. That is luck. That is randomness striking at the worst possible time.
But because of resulting, we as a culture ignore all that logic. We just see the interception and we scream bad decision. We act like the interception was inevitable just because it happened.
Exactly. Duke defines resulting as the natural human tendency to equate the quality of a decision with the quality of its outcome. And it is incredibly dangerous.
Why is it so dangerous?
Because if we only judge our lives by results, we might change a genuinely great strategy just because we got unlucky once. Or even worse, we might keep using a terrible strategy just because we got lucky and won.
She tells a really powerful story about a CEO that illustrates this perfectly in a business context. This CEO had recently fired a company president.
Right. This was an actual consulting client of hers. The CEO fired the president and they hired a replacement. And the replacement was, well, let's just say, not great.
A disaster.
The company started tanking, sales fell off a cliff, morale dropped, people were quitting. So the CEO is sitting there in his office, beating himself up, telling Duke, I mean, such a massive mistake firing the old president. I should have kept him.
Because the result was bad. He's resulting.
Exactly. But Duke stopped him and dug deeper. She asked about the actual process. She said, why did you fire him in the first place?
And what did he say?
Well, they had done a very thorough competitor analysis. They saw they were underperforming the market under this president. They tried executive coaching for him for months, and it failed. They considered splitting his role, but decided against it. They looked at the talent pool available outside the company.
So it wasn't a rash decision at all.
Not at all. They had a robust, thoughtful, data-driven process that logically led to the conclusion that the president needed to go.
So the decision to fire him was actually a good decision based on what they knew at the time.
Yes, it was a very good bet, but it didn't work out. The CEO was suffering from hindsight bias, sitting there saying, I should have known it would turn out this way.
But he couldn't have known.
He couldn't have. He fell victim to resulting. He thought the bad outcome meant he was an incompetent leader, rather than realizing he made a sound choice that just fell prey to the natural uncertainty of the hiring market.
It really goes back to that distinction you made earlier, the von Neumann distinction. John von Neumann, the famous mathematician and father of game theory.
A true giant of 20th century intellect. He worked on the Manhattan Project. He pioneered early computers. He was reportedly the model for the character Dr. Strangelove.
A serious guy.
And he actually publicly corrected a scientist named Jacob Bronowski, who tried to compare game theory to chess. Bronowski said something to him like, I'm so excited to apply your game theory to chess. And von Neumann just stopped him cold.
What did he say?
He said, chess is not a game. Chess is a well-defined form of computation.
Wow.
He meant that in chess, you personally may not know the right answer, but there is an objective right answer. If you lose, you made a calculation error. But he said real life consists of bluffing, of little tactics, of deception, of asking yourself, what is the other man going to think I mean to do?
Real life is poker.
It is poker. And treating life like chess, thinking that a bad result always equals a personal mistake, creates this incredibly false sense of certainty in our minds.
We really want the world to be orderly, though.
Of course we do. We want to believe that if we do X, then Y is guaranteed to happen. If I eat kale and run 5 miles every day, I won't get sick. If I work hard and put in the hours, I will get promoted.
But poker teaches you to get comfortable with saying, I am not sure.
Yes, it teaches you that you can do everything perfectly right and still lose.
That is a remarkably hard pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Okay.
We love being right. We are addicted to certainty. So how do we actually shift our mindset then? How do we start thinking like a professional poker player in our daily lives?
Well, Duke introduces this foundational concept, which she calls the bet.
And she uses a fantastic story to explain this about a gambler named John Hennigan, also known in the community as Johnny World.
I love this story. It is so ridiculous,
Yeah.
but it explains the concept so perfectly.
Johnny World.
Yeah.
Let us describe him. He is this very high-stakes gambler, loves the Las Vegas nightlife, sleeps all day up all night. He basically lives for the action.
He is a total creature of the casino environment.
And somehow he gets into a debate with his poker buddies about whether he could survive living in the normal real world. Specifically, they picked Des Moines, Iowa.
A place historically known for being, well, very different from the Vegas Strip. No 24-hour casinos, no bright neon lights, just quiet, normal suburban life.
Right. So the discussion turns into an actual wager. They bet him $30,000 that he cannot live in Des Moines for a single month.
But there are intense restrictions on him.
Yes, he has to stay in a specific geographic area. He can only go to this one specific hotel and bar, and he cannot play golf unless he's just practicing by himself.
So they are systematically stripping away all of his usual stimulation. They are betting that his psychological need for action will outweigh his desire for the $30,000.
Exactly. So Johnny takes the bet. He flies out to Des Moines. And remember, $30,000 is on the line. That is not chump change.
No, even for a high roller, that is a very decent score just for sitting around doing nothing for a month.
He lasts 2 days.
2 days.
2 days. He calls his friends from Iowa and negotiates a settlement. He actually pays them $15,000 out of his own pocket just to let him come home early. He bought out his own bet.
It is a hilarious story, but it perfectly illustrates Duke's main point. All decisions are bets.
All of them.
Hennigan had to weigh the future value of that $30,000 against the immediate misery of his boredom in Iowa. He made a bet on his own tolerance for boredom, and he realized very quickly he had miscalculated.
He thought the probability of him lasting the month was high, but it turned out to be 0?
Yes. But the insight here for the listener isn't just about gambling or Vegas. Duke says that every single decision we make in life is a bet.
Like taking a job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you take a new job, you're making a bet that you will like the corporate culture, that the company won't go under next year, that you won't end up hating your boss.
When you buy a house, you are betting on the long-term housing market, the neighborhood, the school district.
When you choose a parenting style, you are placing a massive bet on how it will impact your child's future development. We are constantly betting against alternative futures.
We are choosing one path and foreclosing on all the others.
We just don't physically put poker chips on the table, so we don't realize that is what we are doing.
But we generally don't think of our lives that way. We think, I'm choosing this house because it is the right choice. We don't think I am betting my 30-year financial happiness on this outcome.
And that is exactly the problem. Because when we don't consciously treat it like a bet, we ignore the underlying uncertainty. We ignore the role of luck.
We become way too confident in our own beliefs.
We start thinking we know things for an absolute fact when we really just have a decent hunch.
Speaking of beliefs, this next part was a huge eye-opener for me in the source material. We generally tend to think of ourselves as very rational creatures. We think the internal process goes something like this. Step 1, hear information. Step 2, vet it and check if it is actually true. Step 3, form a belief.
That is the ideal scenario. That is what we call the Cartesian model, named after René Descartes.
Right.
He believed human beings were inherently skeptical by nature. But the modern research, specifically from a psychologist named Daniel Gilbert, shows our actual neurological process is Spinozan.
How does that work?
It goes like this. Step 1, hear information. Step 2, automatically believe it. Step 3, maybe if we have extra time or energy later, we vet it.
Wait, so you are saying we believe things by default the second we hear them?
Yes, and there is a very, very good evolutionary reason for this wiring. Imagine you are an early human living on the savannah thousands of years ago. You hear a sudden rustle in the tall grass.
Yeah.
Your friend screams, "Lion."
I run immediately.
You run. You do not stand there rubbing your chin saying, let me vet this source. Is it really a lion? Or is it just the wind? Let me collect more empirical data.
Because if you pause to vet the information, you get eaten.
Exactly. The early humans who stopped to vet the information died. The humans who believed the scream immediately survived to pass on their genes. We are the direct descendants of the people who ran away from the rustling grass without thinking.
So our brains are literally hardwired to accept new information as true first and ask questions much, much later.
Correct. But in the modern information age, that ancient wiring is an absolute disaster. We hear a rumor at work, or we read a flashy headline, or we see a political meme on social media, and our brain's default setting is true.
And because vetting that information takes real cognitive effort, it literally burns calories to think critically, we usually just skip the vetting step entirely.
And then we get stuck in a dangerous loop called motivated reasoning.
Let us define that. What is motivated reasoning?
Once we form that initial belief, however haphazardly we formed it, we actively seek out evidence to confirm it. And we subconsciously ignore or discredit any evidence that contradicts it.
We build a filter bubble.
We live in a filter bubble of our own making. We basically become high-priced defense attorneys for our own unvetted beliefs.
There was that classic academic study she mentioned in the book. They saw a game. It involved a Dartmouth versus Princeton football game.
The very famous study. This was a really rough college game back in the 1950s. Lots of aggressive penalties, players getting injured, tempers flaring.
Right.
Sometime later, psychologists showed the exact same black and white film of the game to groups of students from both schools. The Princeton students watching the film saw Dartmouth commit way more penalties and dirty plays. The Dartmouth students watching the exact same film saw the complete opposite.
They were looking at the exact same objective reality, but their prior allegiance, their existing belief about their team, literally changed what their eyes process.
They weren't lying on the survey. Their brains were actively filtering the visual data in real time to perfectly match their team loyalty.
That explains so much about modern politics today, or even just arguments you have with your friends about sports. But here is the real kicker that Duke points out. Being smart doesn't actually help you avoid this.
No, it actually makes it much worse. This is the truly frightening part for a lot of people to hear. Duke points out that being highly intelligent just makes you significantly better at rationalizing your own biases.
Because you can argue better.
Yes. You are better at constructing a highly complex, logical-sounding narrative to defend what you blindly already believe. You aren't actually a better truth seeker. You are just a much better spin doctor for your own bad ideas.
So if raw intellect isn't the cure for this bias, what is? Enter the wanna bet solution.
It is a disarmingly simple question that completely transforms the dynamic of any conversation.
How does it work?
Imagine you confidently state a fact. You say, Citizen Kane is the best movie ever made. And I look at you across the table and I just say, Want to bet. What happens internally to you?
I freeze. I suddenly realize I have to put something real on the line to back up my opinion.
Exactly. It forcefully moves you from the mindset of this is a concrete fact to asking yourself, how sure am I really? It manually engages that vetting process that our brains usually prefer to skip.
You have to check your confidence level.
You have to ask yourself, wait a minute, have I seen every movie ever made? What metric are we even using to define best? Am I sure enough about this to lose $100 right now?
It changes the entire paradigm from a binary right or wrong situation to a probability scale. You start saying, I am 60% sure instead of I am positive.
And that shift is an absolute game changer for how we interact with the world. Duke talks about the maternal grandfather baldness myth.
Oh, I know this one. That men inherit male pattern baldness strictly from their mother's father.
Right. Most people believe that.
I believed that for years. I would look at my mom's dad and think, well, he has a full head of hair, so I'm totally safe.
It is a very common belief. But if someone challenged you right now to bet $1,000 on that being a biological fact, you would probably pause.
I would definitely pause.
You would say, hold on, let me Google that first. And you would find out pretty quickly it is actually polygenic. The genes come from both sides of the family.
But we walk around believing it as a solid fact for decades because we have never been financially challenged to bet on it.
Exactly. So the ultimate goal here is to train yourself to start thinking in probabilities all the time. Instead of saying, I am sure this marketing plan will work, saying, I am 70% sure this marketing plan will work.
It sounds like a really subtle shift in vocabulary, but it is actually profound when you put it into practice.
It changes everything.
Because when you say, I am 60% sure, you're giving yourself permission to be wrong, it removes the ego and the shame. If you loudly proclaim you are 100% sure and you end up being wrong, you look like a complete fool. Your reputation takes a hit.
Right, your ego's bruised.
But if you say you are 60% sure and things go sideways, well, the 40% possibility just happened to occur. It invites collaboration instead of conflict. It makes you a truth seeker instead of just someone desperately trying to win an argument.
I love that framing. It invites collaboration. Saying, I am not completely sure. What you think is a much more inviting conversational opening than saying, here is the undeniable truth. It explicitly signals to the other person that you are open to receiving new information.
Precisely. It creates a psychological workspace where the actual truth can emerge without people getting defensive.
Okay, so we have covered the danger of resulting and we have unpacked the wanna bet mindset to calibrate our beliefs. Now we need to transition into talking about what happens after the decision is made, fielding the outcomes.
Because life is constantly throwing outcomes at us. It is giving us feedback constantly, but the signal is incredibly noisy.
Very noisy. Like we said earlier in chess, the feedback is crystal clear. You make a move, you immediately see your opponent's response. In life, not so much. Duke uses the Snackwell's phenomenon to perfectly illustrate this noise. Do you remember Snackwell's cookies?
Oh, the green box. Fat-free. I remember these vividly from the 1990s. We all thought we had found the absolute holy grail of snacking. We could eat entire boxes of chocolate cookies and somehow still lose weight.
Exactly. Millions of people ate them in bulk, thinking they were making a healthy choice. Because the prevailing cultural belief at the time was simply low fat equals good.
Right.
But the reality was, Snackwells were absolutely loaded with refined sugar and extra calories to make them taste good without the fat. So people naturally gained weight eating them.
Lots of weight.
But here is the problem with noisy feedback. When those people gained the weight, it was incredibly hard for them to correctly link the weight gain back to the cookies.
Right, because their prior belief that fat-free was healthy was so deeply ingrained, they probably looked at the scale and thought, oh, it must be my metabolism slowing down as I age, or I must not be doing enough cardio at the gym.
They fielded the outcome incorrectly. They put the data of the weight gain in the bad luck bucket or the uncontrollable conditions bucket instead of putting in the bad decision bucket where it belonged.
They didn't learn from the negative feedback loop because their existing belief completely blinded them to the actual cause and effect.
And this leads us directly into a psychological trap called the self-serving bias. This is the big one. This is the ultimate ego defense mechanism.
This is the pattern where we naturally attribute all of our good outcomes to our own skill and all of our bad outcomes to bad luck.
I won because I am an absolute genius. I lost because the referee blew the call at the last second.
Exactly. She brings up Phil Hellmuth to illustrate this, the famous poker pro.
The poker brat.
Now, Hellmuth is a legitimate legend of the game, 15 World Series bracelets, the whole deal. But he is famous for this legendary quote he gave after losing a big tournament. He said, "If it weren't for luck, I would win every single one."
Which is such an incredible, staggering statement of ego.
It really is.
He is basically saying to the world, I have completely solved the game of poker. I'm fundamentally perfect. The only conceivable reason I ever lose money is because of random, uncontrollable variance.
And while saying that might actively protect his fragile ego in the moment because it feels good to think you are perfect, it totally blocks any future learning.
How so?
If every single loss is just categorized as bad luck, you never have to sit down and examine your own play. You never have to ask yourself, did I actually make a strategic mistake on that hand? You remain completely stagnant.
Contrast that attitude with the story of a guy she calls Nick the Greek. Not the famous historical gambler, but a regular local guy Annie used to play cards with in Montana at the Crystal Lounge.
Nick the Greek is such a tragic figure in the context of this book.
He really is.
He had this totally bizarre, deeply held belief that playing 7-2 offsuit, which for the non-poker players listening is statistically the absolute worst starting hand you can possibly be dealt in Texas Hold'em, was actually a brilliant strategy because of the element of surprise.
His logic was literally they will never see it coming.
Right. And here's the truly insidious part about playing a game of probability. Because of randomness, occasionally he would actually win a big pot with that terrible hand. And when he did win, he would stand up and say, "See, my strategy is pure genius. I outplayed all of you." He attributed the random win entirely to his own skill.
But most of the time, the math caught up with him and he lost.
Right, most of the time he lost his money. And when he lost, he would immediately say, "Oh, bad luck. The cards just didn't fall my way today."
He was systematically sorting the feedback from the universe into the completely wrong buckets. Wins automatically went to the skill bucket, losses automatically went to the luck bucket.
And because he aggressively refused to learn from the real feedback loop, he eventually went totally broke. He was deported, actually. He kept making the exact same bad bet over and over because his internal mechanism for fielding outcomes was fundamentally broken.
He was essentially being behaviorally reinforced by those rare intermittent wins, like a lab rat in a cage pressing a lever. And he completely ignored the overwhelming mountain of data showing that he was losing all his money long term.
But the fascinating thing is we don't just do this to ourselves. We do the exact reverse to other people.
The flip side of the bias, when we mess up, it is bad luck. But when you mess up, it is entirely your fault.
Let us talk about the Steve Bartman incident. Chicago Cubs fans listening, you might want to cover your ears for a second.
Oh, poor Steve Bartman.
2003 baseball playoffs.
The Cubs are 5 outs away from making it to the World Series, which they hadn't done in decades. A foul ball comes slicing into the stands down the left field line. Bartman reaches up for it and deflects it away from the Cubs outfielder, Moises Alou, who was trying to make the catch.
And the entire stadium turns on him instantly. It was terrifying.
They absolutely destroyed him. He required police protection to leave the stadium. He was universally blamed for the Cubs losing the entire series.
But if you actually look at the replay from the broadcast, almost every single fan in that section was reaching up for that ball.
It is a natural reflex.
Bartman was just the incredibly unlucky guy who happened to be in the exact right seat to touch it. Plus, people forget, the Cubs shortstop Alex Gonzalez completely booted a routine double play ground ball right after that incident. The whole team collapsed under the pressure.
But the cultural narrative wasn't the Cubs played badly or Bartman just got exceptionally unlucky. The narrative was Steve Bartman is a villain who ruined the season.
We judge others with absolutely zero compassion, and we judge ourselves with total infinite compassion.
And Duke argues that to learn to really master thinking in bets, we have to actively flip that dynamic. We have to look at other people's bad outcomes and think, wow, that could easily have been me. How much of that was just bad luck?
Give them grace.
And we have to look at our own bad outcomes with harsh curiosity. We have to ask, what part of this failure was actually my fault?
Duke holds up Phil Ivey as the ultimate gold standard for this mindset.
Phil Ivey is widely considered to be arguably the best all-around poker player to ever live. And there was a famous story about him winning a massive high-stakes tournament. Huge prize money, millions of dollars on the line.
He takes first place.
He wins the whole thing. And instead of going out to the clubs and partying to celebrate, he went to a quiet dinner with a few other top pros and spent the entire night meticulously deconstructing every single minor mistake he felt he made during the tournament.
He just won the biggest event of the year.
He won. But he knew deep down that winning didn't mean he played perfectly. He actively separated the result from his decision quality. She wanted to learn and improve.
He substituted the cheap dopamine hit of being right with the much harder dopamine hit of being a truth seeker.
He was vastly more interested in finding his own strategic flaws than he was in celebrating his massive victory.
That is the daily habit we all need to build. But, and this is a very big but Duke says we cannot actually do this alone. Our brains are simply too good at lying to us.
We need a buddy system.
We have blind spots. We physically cannot see our own cognitive biases. It is literally like trying to see your own ear without using a mirror. You need a mirror. You need other trusted people to tell you that objective truth.
She uses the Matrix movie analogy here, which I think works perfectly. The red pill versus the blue pill.
Break that down for us.
Taking the blue pill means staying in the warm comfort of your own illusions. Telling yourself, I am always right, my losses are just bad luck, everyone else around me is an idiot.
It feels really good in the short term.
It feels great. Taking the red pill means waking up to reality. And reality is messy. It involves openly admitting your mistakes. It is highly uncomfortable.
And because it is so uncomfortable, you cannot just walk up to someone on the street and force feed them the red pill.
No, you definitely cannot.
She tells a very cringeworthy story about David Letterman interviewing the reality TV star Lauren Conrad from the show The Hills to demonstrate this.
This was a genuinely painful television interview to watch. Lauren Conrad is sitting there talking about all this intense drama in her personal life. Her roommates are fighting with her. Her boyfriends are cheating on her. Her best friends are betraying her left and right.
A typical reality show chaos.
Right. And Letterman stops her, looks her dead in the eye, and says, and that raises the question, maybe you are the problem.
Ouch. The studio audience literally gasped.
It did not go over well at all.
Yeah.
Because she had absolutely not consented to receiving that kind of blunt, truth-seeking feedback. She was there for a fluffy promotional talk show interview, not a psychological intervention. She felt totally attacked.
So the key lesson here is do not letterman the people in your life.
Exactly, unless they explicitly ask for it.
Yeah.
You need an explicit agreement beforehand. You need to form a truth-seeking pod.
What does that look like?
You need a verbal or even written charter with your friends or colleagues that says, hey, we are actively going to challenge each other's assumptions. We are going to be radically honest about our mistakes. We give each other full permission to be the mirror.
She lists a few specific rules for making these pods actually work. One of the main ones is prioritizing accuracy over confirmation.
Most friend groups are just polite echo chambers. You complain and say, oh, my boss is such a jerk, and your friends automatically say, you are so right to yell at him, he is awful.
They validate you.
Right. But a truth-seeking pod operates differently. They say, okay, let us look at the facts here. Could you have handled that interaction differently? Is it possible you were just tired and overreacted?
Another critical rule is accountability. And she uses a very funny anecdote about a guy named Ira the Whale and a bet involving White Castle burgers to highlight this.
A classic degenerate gambling story. A group of high-stakes bettors are sitting around debating if this guy known as Ira the Whale can physically eat 100 White Castle burgers in one single sitting.
Those little square sliders?
Right. And most of the people in the room are aggressively betting against him. They think it is biologically impossible for a human stomach to hold that much food. But David Gray, another experienced gambler, bets heavily on him to succeed. He puts serious money down.
Why would he do that?
Because he actually saw Ira order 20 burgers and a large chocolate shake, just as a light appetizer before the actual bet even officially started.
That is what we call gathering empirical research.
But the underlying point is that putting real money on the line, creating financial accountability, forces you to be accurate instead of just opinionated.
If you just have an opinion, you can say whatever pops into your head.
But if you have $200 riding on the outcome, you pay very close attention to the facts. A good decision pod creates social accountability. You know you're going to have to logically explain your decision to the group later in the week, so you think much more clearly and carefully in the moment.
You do not want to look foolish in front of your respected pod members.
Exactly. And finally, the last rule is diversity of opinion.
She references the philosopher John Stuart Mill here, specifically his essay on liberty.
Mill argued that true wisdom only comes from hearing absolutely every variety of opinion. You cannot possibly get to the objective truth if everyone in your circle thinks exactly like you do.
You need dissent. You need your ideas to collide with error.
She quotes Eric Seidel again, another legendary poker pro. Apparently, early in her career, whenever Annie would start complaining about getting bad luck at the tables, Eric would just brutally shut her down.
He wouldn't even let her finish the sentence.
He would hold up a hand and say, I do not want to hear it. If you have a legitimate question about poker strategy, ask me. But your bad luck stories are just boring.
That is some serious tough love right there.
It is harsh, but it perfectly enforced the group norm. It forced her to focus only on what is controllable. Focus entirely on the decision quality, not the unavoidable result. Venting your frustrations might feel good in the moment, but it absolutely does not make you a better decision maker long term.
So we have covered a massive amount of ground here today. Let us bring it all back home for the listener. What does all of this actually mean for someone listening who isn't planning on becoming a professional poker player anytime soon?
It means fundamentally realizing that your life is a complex game of probabilities, not a game of simple certainties. We all have to stop resulting. Just because a project failed doesn't automatically mean you made a mistake planning it.
And just because an investment succeeded doesn't mean you are a financial genius.
Exactly. It means actively adopting that wanna bet mindset in your daily life. Constantly checking your own confidence levels. Getting comfortable saying, I am 70% sure about this instead of claiming to be 100% sure.
And it means intentionally finding your people, seeking out that truth-seeking pod we talked about. Because sheer willpower just isn't enough to overcome millions of years of evolution. We are biologically wired to relentlessly protect our own egos. We desperately need outside help to see our own blind spots.
And here's the final provocative thought I really want to leave everyone with today. It is about the concept of compound interest, but applied to your choices.
Yes, this is a powerful idea. Thinking in bets is undeniably hard. It feels very unnatural at first. It takes a lot of cognitive effort to override your default settings.
It is exhausting sometimes.
But if you can just get a tiny bit better at it, if you can catch just a few more of those hidden learning opportunities than the Nick the Greeks of the world do, that advantage compounds heavily over time.
You do not have to be totally perfect. You do not have to become Phil Ivey by tomorrow morning. You just have to try to be slightly less wrong, slightly more often than you were yesterday.
And over the course of a long lifetime, that tiny difference, that small incremental edge in decision-making, is the difference between eventually going broke and consistently winning the tournament of life.
It is the absolute difference between living a life full of defensive regret and living a life of continuous compounding improvement.
So the ultimate question we leave you with today is simply this. Are you willing to take the red pill? Are you willing to set aside your ego and admit that you might just be not sure? Or will you choose to stay in the warm, blinding comfort of always needing to be right?
I will take the red pill every time, even if it gives me a headache every now and then.
Me too. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We will see you next time.